saying those 8 stories, floor 6 actually through 13, so I guess that's 8, okay? Again, it's being viewed, and they show you column 79 buckling to the north, and that's viewed from the southeast direction. Of course, in the upper view here, they show that the floors, they're saying the floors fell away. Column 79 to 81 buckled, that's the north to south collapse. And then they show in the bottom view, they show the east to west progression. This is all the interior. The exterior hasn't fallen yet, according to this. And this shows you this is all interior also. You're not looking at the exterior of the building, that's stripped away. They're showing, if you look from left to right, you'll see the progression that they say occurred. And I just want you to take a good look at that one all the way on the right side. They're saying an entire interior came down before the exterior came down. And we'll look at that later. So again, this is their words describing what I just mentioned to you. And these are the results of their model. And I just want to mention that it would have been nice to have saved the steel, or at least photographed it, so we could all see those buckled columns. So here I just want to get into, mention some of them, but the problems with the veracity of the NIST World Trade Center 7 report and why it is so controversial. Of course, Kevin mentioned John Salvarinis' paper. He was the project manager for Frankel Steel. They were a steel fabricator and erector for World Trade Center Building 7. And of course, he shows that there were shear studs on those girders. On the girders, not only at column 79, but between column 79 and 80 and 81, and to the exterior. And NIST did not deny that in their earlier report, as Kevin told you also. Again, here's a bigger view of a shear stud insulation, and take a good look. In some cases, there's double rows, but they're on every horizontal member. You don't see any members skipped there. And I've talked to other structural engineers, and I don't do buildings every day. I'm in the aerospace industry and communication industry. Mechanical engineers do structural work, but it's ships, airplanes, things like that. It's the same science. But I've talked to people in the building industry, and they said it would be highly unusual not to have shear studs on those girders. And Salvarinis' paper from 1986, bear in mind, he wouldn't have known anything about a 2001 failure at that point, shows shear studs. So who do you believe? So in addition to not having shear studs in the girder, what does the NIST model do? And Kevin mentioned some of this. It heats the steel beams to 600 degrees C and the girder to 500 degrees C in 1.5 seconds, I believe. It's very fast. But it also, even more importantly, it sets the thermal conductivity of the steel beams to 0. Okay? The steel beams are not allowed to transfer their heat. They have to keep it. Okay? So they're unrealistically preventing any potential limitation of the temperature. I guess it was tough to get, even as unsupported as the report is, to get it to that point. And they don't heat the concrete or allow it to expand with the steel, even though concrete has the same coefficient of expansion with steel. If it didn't, and all these reinforced concrete structures, things would be breaking up because you'd have differential expansion. It doesn't because the concrete has the same expansion. I think it's engineered that way. There's a reason for it, because you don't want that differential expansion. At any rate, I think it's fair to say those the concrete slabs and the floor pans under them would have been heated, and there would have been some thermal conductivity through those beams and that girder into those floors. But we're not allowed to know that. So the girder that NIST says came off its seats was on column 79 and in the interior and column 44 in the exterior. 79 was a build-up column with the extra plate, so its seat was on the outside. 44, the seat was on the inside because it was a regular I shape. So what happens there is the column is inside the flanges on column 44 in the exterior. So it can't move, it can't translate, but it can rotate. And on column 79, it can both translate or rotate. And that's what that's showing you there. It acts like it's pinned at the exterior, and it's like a roller on column 79. What's interesting is earlier, if you look in the upper right view, this told us that the lateral stiffness of that girder was much less than the axial stiffness of those beams. Okay, we accept that. But now, in the analysis where they want to say the beams buckled, we have to ask the question, well, where did the stiffness come on the girder to buckle the beam? Something's got to be stopping the beam. There's no answer to that. They just say it buckled. They don't provide us data. They don't provide us the analysis. They just say what they found happen in their model, and that this is what happened. And they try to justify it. However, when you look at that actual photo of a beam buckling due to thermal expansion is from the Cardington test in the United Kingdom. Kevin showed you a picture of that. That's what thermal expansion buckling of a beam is like. It's not the same as column buckling, where the load is still on it. The load is on it until it's relieved, and that's it. It's like pushing your finger against something, and it compresses until it can withstand the load. That's all that happens in a beam. It just doesn't until it relieves the load. It doesn't continue like a column does because the load's gone once it buckles. And it's very local buckling like you see there. But even if the beams did buckle, suppose NIST did walk away from their walk-off, push-off failure. It says, oh yeah, they buckled, they were pulled off. Well, then we have to ask the question, well, the amount of shortening due to buckling could only be equal to the thermal expansion you had, and it wasn't enough to push it off, so how could it be enough to pull it off now? It's very confusing. And additionally, the vertical load capacity of a beam when it has a slight local buckling is generally not upset. And I think you saw in the Cardington photo of the beam just sagged, it still supported the floor. So I've been telling you about the beam, this slide just talks about the push off or pull off, and the fact that they don't get enough expansion in a 52 or 53 foot beam with the temperature differential they get from room temperature up to 600 degrees. It's just not enough. And in fact, when they say it's 400 degrees, it's much less. It's only about 3 inches. They need 6 inches. They can't get there. So it's impossible, another impossible situation. I guess they're depending on public apathy. It sounds plausible. In addition, they didn't test this situation. They could have easily put 4 or 5 beams together with a girder and a couple columns, even in one-story situation. We could do it on this stage and heat those beams up to 600 degrees centigrade and see if they could push that girder off. It won't happen. It won't happen because these thermal expansions are very well understood phenomena. And even if you put the thermal expansion all in that one direction, they can't get there. In addition to that, why would column 79 buckle if it lost one of the 3 lateral supporting girders? It was still supported in 2 orthogonal directions by the other 2 girders, the one framing in from the west and the one framing in from the south. And I was telling you the standard building design practice is to apply a minimum of 0.6% lateral support at each floor. All right, so that doesn't amount to a whole lot, and those bolts on those girders, the 4 bolts, each one of those bolts could provide 45,000 pounds. That's how much force they could provide. So 4 of them, it's 180,000 pounds. You would only need about 32,000 pounds to restrain the column from buckling. You had basically 6 times that amount. So what does this say about all the rest of the girders? Well, they say their bolts broke too. The problem is there was no fires on floors 5, 6, and 10. 10 was right in the middle of this supposedly slender column.